Hello everyone. My name is oh, this is Robotic. No, 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 this is I need to take this. No, this is through the keyboard. Hey, so hello everyone. I'm Armand Jordana, and I'm a PhD student at New York University. And today I'm going to talk about dynamic game control with imperfect state observation. So in robotics, there are a lot of different sources of uncertainties that we need to consider. Some come from the estimation due to the fact that our sensors are noisy, and some comes from the fact that our models from physics are not always perfectly accurate. And the challenge is how can we derive controllers that are robust to those uncertainties, and how can we derive algorithms that are fast enough to be deployed in real time on the hardware. So to address those goals, we consider a minimax formulation that plans for the worst case disturbances in order to be robust to the estimation uncertainty and to the modeling uncertainty. And we introduce an efficient algorithm to solve it. And we think it makes it a promising tool to do output feedback model predictive control. So to do MPC directly from raw measurements. So here's a short recap on optimal control. So usually what we do is when we do MPC is at each time step, we solve this trajectory optimization problem where we have a state X, a control input U, and we want to find the best control sequence U that minimizes a given cost while the state is subject to the following dynamics. So this is something very well studied. In the nonlinear case, there are a lot of numerical algorithms to solve it. BDP is one of them, and it's popular because it's efficient. However, this doesn't take into account the fact that there are some uncertainties in our model. And one way to take them in account is to prepare for the worst, and so to have a min-max formulation where we consider additive disturbances W to our dynamics and prepare for the worst. So we minimize on the control and maximize on the disturbances. And so now we have to add this term, this penalty term here that ensures that everything is well defined, and this can be thought as the likelihood of a disturbance. However, now the thing that is missing is that this assumes that we knew the initial condition x0 hat, and in practice we don't know it. We only have access to measurements, which are function of the state. And so now the question is, how can we solve the same problem directly from measurements? So what is typically done is that we estimate a state directly from a sequence of measurements and solve the same problem, except that now we start at time t. And now the remaining question is how to be robust to this estimate xt hat. And so what we typically do is that we prepare for the worst also for this estimate, and have this maximization on xt hat, and we have to add this term here, which ensures that everything is well defined and that resembles, but basically ensures that even though we maximize on xt hat, it will still be something likely given the past measurements. So you can find more details on this formulation in our paper. And so in this paper, we also introduce an algorithm to solve this min-max formulation efficiently. One thing that we also do is that we prove that the algorithm is equivalent to a Newton step, which is nice because it gives us some convergence guarantees. And we also derive our algorithm in a DDP-like way. And this makes the algorithm, this gives a linear complexity in the time horizon to the algorithm, which is good because by default, a Newton step will have a cubic complexity. So that's very good to real-time control. Okay, so now some results. So in this experiment, I consider like a quadrator that tries to avoid an obstacle to reach a target, sorry. So here the control input is the force applied at each rotor. So on this plot, I show in blue the neutral formulation, so the solution to the optimal control problem, and in green solution to the dynamic game solver. And so here, the dynamic game solver prepares for the worst. And so in that situation, the worst is to be pushed by the disturbances towards the obstacle. So this is only the solution of the solvers of the initial plan. And now the question is, how does this behave when we put this in an MPC loop and simulate it with Gaussian noise like standard disturbances? So now we can see that because the worst did not happen in the simulation, the dynamic game controller is able to remain further from the obstacle, and that's the kind of behavior that we wanted. Okay. We also have an experiment on a more complex system that shows that the algorithm scales well. If you're interested, you can look about it in the paper. And so to conclude, we introduced an algorithm to do dynamic game control with imperfect state observation in the nonlinear case. We proved that the algorithm was equivalent to a Newton step in order to have some convergence guarantees. And we also illustrated the sensitive behavior of the algorithm. Yeah.
So now we have a couple of speakers that are in the Zoom room. Maybe can you, Mingsong, can you say something? I think maybe we have to. I already muted, yeah, but we have to switch the microphone. I think I already did that.
Hello.
Hello. Yes.
Hi. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Hello everyone. Thank you for having me here. My name is Mingsong. I'm from Stevens Institute of Technology. So my nightly presentation today is about. By the way, how to control the screen?
I will switch the slides for you. So just let me know when I should go to the next slide.
Oh, okay. Thank you. So my Lightning Talk presentation today is about risk-averse sequential decision under stochastic dominance constraints. So this research is a corporate work with my PhD advisor, Professor Darinka Denshua, and my colleague Yunxuan Ye. Can we go to the, okay. Okay, so let's talk about the stochastic dominance first. It's a risk-averse concept that comparing random variables comprehensively considering the distribution where the stochastic order is the first order dominance. It compares random variables regarding their cumulative distribution function. So one random variable dominates the other one. The cumulative distribution function curve is above that of the other. Extended from the very first stochastic order, one can have the case ordered stochastic dominance. Just simply use the integral of the k minus 1's order f function. Can we go to the next slide? Yeah, thank you. So one alternative perspective of the stochastic dominance is the new utility function. So every kind of the stochastic dominance corresponding to a certain family of utility functions. The dominance means a preference regarding the expectation distorted by the utility functions. For example, in the case of the second order stochastic dominance shown in the slide, the corresponding utility functions family is the short form in the function in the expectation. In fact, stochastic dominance is also closely connected to risk measure. So stochastic dominance is the continual form of the risk measure. Risk measure concerns about certain points of the f function curve. Instead, stochastic dominance considers an interval of the f function. Can we go to the next slide? Thank you. So in our research, we propose time consistent order to suit with the multi-stage problem setting. It means this certain type of stochastic dominance compares sequential random variables regarding the conditional probability distributions. By the definition, it's showing the slide. The time consistency requires the sum of obtained rewards and the future uncertain rewards, hence its risk controlled condition on the observed events. For our future research, we consider about several modifications possible for the definition. For example, discounting the future rewards, or making other condition on the time and the information, or using other time consistent projection instead of conditional expression. Can we go to the next slide? Okay, yeah. So it's straightforward for us to propose a multi-stage problem with the time consistent stochastic dominance on the resource. In our paper, we rewrote this formulation, this basic problem formulation in dynamic programming. Can we go to the next slide? Yeah. So we propose a multi-cut algorithm and solve the time consistent stochastic dominance constraint problem up to 3 stages. So the test bed problem is a multi-item News-Winter problem. So in the figures in this slide shows the time consistency. I mean the stochastic dominance between the different of the f function of our solution and the benchmark. So in the first in the left middle figure we have five subfigures. It means like the stochastic dominance is based on its condition on the scenarios of what happened in the second stage, and the right middle figure shows the dominance of the total probability regarding to the total probability. The codes are available at my GitHub. It's not perfect yet, but we are still working on to make the algorithm more stable and more, and by using numerical methods, numerical experiments to discover what's the other perspective of the stochastic dominance we proposed. So that's our work. So this based on our submitted paper recently. If you have interest, you can just email me, either one of us, like my professor or my colleagues, about the question. And for thank you guys for listening. Yeah.
Thank
That's
you.
Yeah.
Peter, are you here?
Hello, yeah, can you hear me all right?
Yes, we can hear you.
Awesome. All right, hello everybody, thanks for having me. My name is Peter, and I'm from the University of Colorado Boulder, and I'm going to be giving a high-level overview on optimal risk avoidance strategy synthesis for robotic systems in dynamic environments. Next slide. So there's a lot of applications where either you have human-robot interaction, or maybe you deploy a robot in a setting that might be very dynamic or unsafe, or have a lot of other agents moving around. And sorry, there might still be animations on this slide. Could you click through those? So the first thing we care about is safety. So your autonomous system obviously has to account for these disturbances in order to be able to make any safety guarantees. And for this, we use a fragment of a temporal logic called safe linear temporal logic. And likewise, we'd also like to have our robotic system eventually accomplish some task. And the key here is to be able to accomplish this task given all of the dynamic parameters of this environment. And for this, we use CoSafe LTL. And the main question here is, can we guarantee both safety and liveness for these systems? So previous work looks at formulating this problem as a two-player turn-based game. So the robotic system is modeled as the first player, and the environment is modeled as the adversarial second player. And these two have mutually exclusive objectives. Click forward one step. So the player objectives. So for the robot, obviously, the robot's trying to complete the task. And for this work, we distinguish the safety and liveness. And we say that the environment tries to drive the system to an unsafe region or violate the safety specification. Next slide, please. So previous work looks at something called a winning strategy. And the benefits of a winning strategy is the robot can always win the game under the assumption that the opponent is adversarial. And this winning strategy can provide formal guarantees in that it can guarantee that your robot will complete the specification. However, it's often very conservative. There might be many environments where if you can't guarantee that your robot completes the specification, you have no way of telling your robot what to do. So this work branches off of a line of work looking at admissible strategies. So in this case, our robot looks at using a risk avoidance strategy to minimize the number of losing opportunities it would experience. And the big benefit of using this is that this strategy always exists anywhere in your environment. From any feasible state, you can always provide some risk-aware guarantees. So I'll briefly go through how I define risk and the methodology for computing a risk avoidance strategy. So in this case, we have a two-player turn-based game. The system state is modeled as a square, and then the environment state is modeled as a circle. And as you can see, I've denoted some violating states where maybe these orange states represent a violation of the safety specification. And risk is any state in which the environment can force a transition to a violating behavior. In this case, I've shown it as yellow. And yeah, if you go forward one slide, if we were to look at a trajectory through this game, we see that through the turn-based semantics, we see two risky states. Therefore, we would say that this trajectory has a risk of 2. Next slide, please. So for this work, we make a key assumption in that we, starting off with our turn-based game, we're able to construct the game from 2 identical transition system models. Click ahead one step. So in these models, we have obviously the violating states and then some accepting states that represent the liveness specifications. Go ahead one slide. So the first step is, now that we have these 2 identical models split apart, we're first going to identify the risk states. So like I said before, a risk state is any state where the environment can force a transition to a violating state in the next step. Go forward once. So here, once we've identified this risk state, we can assign a cost to the risk state. And this cost is just quantifying our risk measure. Go ahead one slide. Now that we've done that, we can transfer the cost to the system abstraction. And then the key here is we remove any violating states from our game. So we're no longer considering any actually violating behavior. We've already quantified that using risk. Next slide. Now, we can, for this work, we can just look at the system abstraction. And since we've made the assumption that the system abstraction is the same as the environment, we can use a optimal backwards reachability, and we can determine the shortest path or shortest path strategy shown by these red arrows. And then in the next slide, we can convert these back to the game strategy. Next slide, please. So I have a quick example here. So this is a grid world environment, and you have some bad states and you have some water states, and then you have a goal. And the safety is never to enter a bad cell and to never visit a water state twice in a row. And the liveness is to collect a water sample, then go to goal. Next slide. Oh, you might have to go ahead 2 more slides. These videos didn't work. So if we don't have any disturbance, our robot can easily just go collect water and then go to goal. However, in this model, the environment can push the robot to any neighboring cell. And obviously, this strategy would not be possible because there are many states on this trajectory where if the environment decided to push the robot, it could enter an unsafe region. Let's go ahead one more slide. So this shows how the robot behaves under some kind of random disturbance. And as you can see, the strategy still is able to carry the robot to goal. And that's it for me. Any questions?
Thank you. So are there any quick questions for the speakers? Yes. Yeah.
I have a question for the first speaker. When it comes to the formulation of the problem, and I was I was a little bit baffled by what is the certainty equivalence principle here, because when you see y as a random variable, then your x will be a random variable. So when you try to say that your control is deterministic, but the control is a function of x, so it's also a random variable. So when you minimize something over a random variable, it does not make sense to me. So then I'm very curious, what is random, what is not random, and what is a certain equivalence principle in this context?
So, well, past measurements are not necessarily random. Once you have measured them, they are numerical values, and you can find like the most likely sequence of states that can explain this sequence of measurements you observed. So,
but when you try to maximize something, right? How can you maximize something over random variable?
but like they're not so they're not so at the point where you do the optimization problem, they are not random variables because you already observe the measurements, and so they're just numerical values.
So then it does not make sense.
Why doesn't it make sense?
So what is random and what is not random?
So I think you assume so you can consider the measurement model as I think the answer is nothing is random. You just like observe some measurements according to something.
So then how you have a likelihood?
So okay. So this formulation is called dynamic game control, and in this formulation, everything is deterministic. But this formulation is very connected to risk-sensitive control, where everything is stochastic. And so you can actually Campi in the 90s proved that this formulation is a limit case of the stochastic formulation, but this one is deterministic. So there are no random variables. But the likelihood term comes from the fact that it's connected to a stochastic function.
I'm still baffled, but it's okay.
Any other questions? I had a question for this last speaker.
Peter, are you still here for a question? I don't think so.
Okay, never mind.
Yeah, I think he isn't here anymore.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Oh, he's actually here, but he's probably not hearing. Oh, unmute just a minute.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Okay, no.
Hi,
Okay,
yeah.
now, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I was just wondering, I think we've heard a little bit today about sort of the idea of failing safely, or, some bad outcomes are better or worse than others. Do you think you could incorporate something like that into your architecture here?
Yeah, so actually the direction we're trying to take this work is not necessarily looking at violating safety, but rather defining risk as being unable to accomplish the task ever in the future. So in that case, just looking at a single liveness specification and whether or not it's actually possible.
Okay. Do you think maybe you could sort of separate out maybe a worst case outcome that you should like avoid at all costs, even if you sort of violate a constraint elsewhere that's maybe a more acceptable, say an outcome that would like, destroy your robot or something.
Oh, I see. Sort of like a, okay, yeah. So sort of more soft constraints.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, I don't plan to consider any of that in the near future with this work, but I think it's definitely an application we could look into.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Okay, then let's go on a shorter coffee break, maybe. Maybe we can come back here at like 20 minutes before 4. That's okay.